pleased to go back and in detail talk about not only the compromises, but the current compromise that's on the table is probably the most important. Now, this issue is over. Why does the shutdown occur? A couple of things. First of all, does everyone know, because it's too easy when nomenclature gets thrown around in Washington, D.C., CR, like you'll hear this term CR and a clean CR. CR means continuing resolution. And in this case, it's a continuing resolution to fund the government based on the budgets that both houses put together. Now, both houses put together a budget back in March. Since April, 17 times, the House has refused to take its budget and the Senate budget to conference. Typically, the way a bill becomes law, I say typically, is that one house raises a bill, the other house raises a bill, and there's usually disagreements, as there is in this case over the budget, but they then go to the conference and they resolve those differences in the conference through the committee, and then they go to a vote on the floor. So for 17 times that's been blocked. What the Senate then said, when the House said that its prerequisite for having a budget was that you had to defund Obamacare, as they call it. It's the Affordable Care Act. And as John Stewart pointed out, this is a bill that was passed in 2009 that is the law of the land that went through 2 election cycles that has been upheld by the Supreme Court. It is the law of the land. Now, I respect the fact that people may disagree with that law. I respect that. And I think those people are both entitled to their opinion and ought to do everything that they can constructively within the law to deal with that issue. The irony of all ironies, and I'll get to that when I get to the solutions part of this, is that here's the Affordable Care Act, which holds the solution to dealing with both our national debt and putting our country back to work, as well as making sure our citizens have health care insurance. But this was the premise on which why we are now in government shutdown is because they insisted that Obamacare had to be defunded, the law of the land, the signature piece of legislation of the president and the majority in the Senate. And there's 201 Democrats in the House and 234 Republicans. So there is not that much, and in fact, the truth be known, more than 1.5 million people, more Democrats voted for the minority. But when you take a look at how districts were gerrymandered, you begin to see the disparity that exists. That's a subject for another whole conversation. But the fact of the matter is that when people say a majority of the people, that is what this is, majority rule. Thomas Friedman's article is also very clear. It's not just, as bad as the shutdown is and the economic facts that it braces for, what's really wrong here in the fact that you would hold the country, forget the law for a minute, that is the law of the land. You're holding the American country hostage to getting your demand, or you'll shut down the government. So what the Senate did was send back with what is called a clean continuing resolution. And the compromise was that it would not be at the Democratic proposed number. It would be at the Republican number. It would be at the more fiscally austere number. That was the compromise, to which the Republicans said, no, if you don't repeal it, if you don't defund it, if you don't delay it, we're not going to be for it. That's a fact. And so we find ourselves in this situation. I applaud the president on two fronts for standing up and saying, look, I'm not going to negotiate on defaulting on America's ability to pay its bills, number one. And number two, I'm not going to negotiate on blackmail where you hold a gun to the nation's head over trying to get 20 million people insurance? Doesn't that seem a bit irrational to anyone who's got any kind of common sense? Irrespective, if you don't like the Affordable Care Act, I get that, I understand that. But it is the law of the land. It did go through 2 elections. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. So why wouldn't you work if you want to change it? Why wouldn't you work together to try to strengthen and improve it? Let's talk about that just for a second.